Don't worry, this isn't yet another video about upscaling. I know you're probably sick of it all by now. So this video will be about the exact opposite of that, which does come with its own pros and cons. And even if you don't want to use it in CSGO, it's still worth knowing about.
Oh, okay.
As it could help in other games and situations. But before I explain it, I do need to tell you about upscaling again first. It's the idea of getting a low resolution image and making it look kind of like a higher resolution one. I covered how to do this in videos just the other week. So far, your opinions have been divided, with one half arguing, what's the point? Why not play the game at low resolutions instead? While the other half of you are arguing, what's the point? Why not play the game at higher resolutions instead? Indeed. In this video, I'll be doing exactly that, by doing the opposite of upscaling. Guess what it's called? I'll give you a second. You're gonna love this. It's downsampling. Oh, and downscaling works as well. Both work. So upscaling gets a smaller image and stretches it in the hope of keeping frame rates high and the image quality as not bad as possible. But downscaling gets an image larger than your monitor and crushes it down to fit it, brute forcing a better quality result. There's no fancy tech here, just pure brute force pixel pushing. Why? What is the purpose in that? Isn't that just really wasteful? Yes, incredibly. But also not, because it produces the most incredible image quality possible, a real treat for the eyes, and it might not even come with any noticeable downside. But first, this video sponsor, NordVPN. Established 10 years ago and going from strength to strength since, NordVPN now has over 5,000 servers in 60 countries across the world. To commemorate this achievement, NordVPN are offering the same reliable service as always, but if you use the code CLICKS then you'll get an extra bonus off the already heavily discounted 2-year plan, and with that you'll get a robust VPN service that will help you tunnel your internet traffic through to another location on the planet. This will help keep the doors open to information access and services, which right now some people are finding very handy indeed. It comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee, so if NordVPN doesn't earn your affections within that time frame, then you can leave and carry on your way regardless. But if you're looking for widespread, fast VPN access, then NordVPN is a long-established, proven option, with easy-to-use software and some powerful features, like an internet kill switch should your connection to their servers go down. And they've now broadened their defences with new threat protection features which defend against malicious ads and downloads, which otherwise would have their own sneaky ways of tracking you. So if you're in the market for a VPN, then check out the link in this video's description, and remember the code CLICKS. While you're down there, click on the settings cog and choose quality. Notice how it doesn't stop at 1080p, but can go higher still, first to 1440p and then to 2160p 4K quality. You might not ever have used this before. If you're not on a 4K screen, you might think it's useless. But it isn't. I urge you to click on it and to see what it does to your image quality. It should make this video look significantly sharper than the lower resolutions do. The first reason why is the bitrate. This deliberately complicated looking scene looks rubbish at lower resolutions because it isn't given enough information on YouTube to make it look right. But the other reason 4K looks better is because of downscaling. This image, for instance, is CSGO running at 1080p. This is the same image at 4K. 1080p, 4K, 1080p, 4K. Even if you're only on a 1080p screen, you should still be able to see the differences, notably to the edges of stuff, which should appear crisper and sharper. A 4K screen is needed to fully appreciate this effect, but it is surprising how much of this carries down to a 1080p screen, even though you'd think that anything more than 1080p on a 1080p screen would be pointless. But here's the thing, it isn't. You know what time it is? It's time to tackle that question that everyone's been asking. What is a pixel? Seriously, what is it? It's a dot on the screen. Each one represents a single colour, yet there's so much more than just that. A pixel can form part of a larger object, like a barrel. Or it can even be the nether region between two different barrels. A prestigious role indeed. This is where downscaling really comes into its own, and if you're not excited about it at this point, then there's no helping you. So despite these pixels all just being one colour each, they can still represent one or several points from within the space they sit. And more is better, but let's cool off for a bit. Forget about all this downscaling and look at what 1080p is. It is what your screen probably is, after all. This is a 1080p image. On a 1080p screen, each pixel will represent exactly 1 point from inside itself. And if we look at this cable, you can see that it just isn't enough. It looks horrible, it's like something out of Minecraft. And that's because each pixel either represents the cable or the wall behind it. This results in the dreaded step effect. These are known as jaggies or aliasing. If only there was a way of unjaggifying it, of anti-aliasing it. That's convenient. MSAA is great. 2 times MSAA grabs 2 different spots from inside a pixel, so if both land on the cable, then the pixel looks like a cable. If both land on the wall, then the pixel looks like the wall. But if one lands on each, it becomes half and half. The result is a much smoother looking line, thanks to the pixels that look halfway between the cable and the wall. And then you have 4 and 8 times MSAA, which do the same thing but with even more increments in between. How much anti-aliasing can you have? There was a time when even Counter-Strike had more than 8 times. It was called 16 times CSAA in the options menu. It was meant to be like 8 times MSAA, but with a bit more, but I never saw any difference in practice. But it still made me feel good about being able to enable it. 16 times. But things went higher still. Years ago, AMD graphics cards had wide and narrow tent options, which went as high as 24 times. I think these got samples from the surrounding areas, causing a very soft, blurry look. I remember one particular LAN party where I forced this on in every game that I played. And I think there was 32 times CSAA as well. And then there was Quincunx anti-aliasing that everybody hated because it made it look all out of focus, like the whole thing had been shifted across by half a pixel. You can tell it was a bad idea because it doesn't exist anymore. And then there's super sampling, which is MSAA across the whole screen, which means it serves the same purpose as downscaling. And if you see SS and think it sounds familiar for some reason, that's because it makes up the second half of DLSS's name. Long story short, a lot of big numbers and silly experiments were thrown around in the earlier days of anti-aliasing. It was a phase that graphics cards went through and eventually grew out of. So you're not missing out on much. So what's the problem? Why don't we just use 8 times MSAA to solve this whole mess? Well, for a start, it can be quite demanding to run. But the bigger problem is, it misses some of the edges. These palm tree leaves, for instance, are still pixelated, even with 8 times MSAA, because it doesn't even touch these edges. It doesn't see them as that. It sees them as a flat texture with some transparent holes in, so it doesn't even touch them. Unfortunately, this is why we don't see MSAA too much in games anymore. There are just too many things it fails to touch. So what can we use instead? We could use upscale. No, I promised I wouldn't talk about that. So what we need instead is a hero. An anti-aliasing hero. Oh look, it's FXAA, here to save the day. Put it simply, FXAA intrudes onto your screen, vomits Vaseline all over the place, fucks your mum, and then tumbles out the nearest window to ruin somebody else's day. Nice one, FXAA. You did your best, it just happens to be really, really bad. Actually, no. Ignorance is bliss. FXAA will smooth the image effectively and very quickly, so at a pinch, it's a great solution for fans of super high frame rates to use. But I can ruin it for you by showing you that it's literally the same as no anti-aliasing at all, but much blurrier. It doesn't add more details. It can't, for example, construct small details like the prongs on these antennae like MSAA can, because MSAA is adding detail to the image, while FXAA is merely shooting goo all over what's already there. We need another kind of hero, a downsampling hero. Do you remember those early Half-Life Alyx pictures? They look great, didn't they? This is in part because it's Source 2, but I think there's more to it than that. If you zoom into these early pictures, you won't find a single stray pixel in sight. It's so good, in fact. I don't think it's the work of anti-aliasing. I think that downscaling must be involved here. I believe that these images must have been crushed down from some staggeringly high resolution, 8K maybe, possibly even 16K, because every detail looks so well defined. It's less like a video game image and more like a photo. So here you go. On the left, CSGO without anti-aliasing. In the middle, 8 times MSAA, which is the current best. But on the right is an image that was rendered at 8K then crushed down to 1080p. And the result is glorious. This is what the game is meant to look like. All this time, you've assumed that those palm trees are meant to look like something from a PlayStation 2 game. But if they're shown properly, they actually look like palm trees, just as nature intended. And it's almost as though this weird globe thing was made simply to show off how great downsampling is, and how inferior the rendering methods are that we've grown accustomed to using instead. And this crate on the ground, previously untouched by anti-aliasing, now reveals the crisscross pattern it was always meant to have, as nature intended. Even on edges that MSAA has already smoothed, downsampling improves them further still. The edge of this tree trunk, even smoother. It is absolutely glorious. Just a shame that downsampling slows your PC down, isn't it? But what if it didn't? What if you could run it as quickly as any other setting? Then there would be no downside. And looking at what the pros are using, I can say that most of them can downsample with barely any impact to their frame rate at all. How could this be? How can you get so much more for free? It's simple. In your PC you have a CPU and a GPU, and these are the components which dictate your frame rate. At a certain graphical resolution, there's a sweet spot where they'll both be working as quickly as each other. I've added some numbers onto this graph to demonstrate how this works. This line represents your CPU, or processor. You can see this one can power CSGO at 500 FPS. It doesn't care which resolution you're playing the game at. It can still power CSGO at 500 FPS. But this line represents the GPU, or graphics card. And you can see, this one really cares about which resolution you're gaming at. This one can play CSGO at 720p at 1000 FPS, but it can only run 4K at 100 FPS. If you put these two components together though, and it'll show how quickly your PC can run CSGO. At 720p, even though your graphics card could run it at 1000 FPS, you won't be getting that. No, you'll only be getting 500 FPS because it's being limited by your CPU, which can only handle 500 FPS. You're being CPU limited. Look to the other extreme and the opposite is happening. Your CPU can still give you 500 FPS, but you won't get it because your graphics card is now the one limiting you, down to just 100 FPS. You're being GPU limited. And somewhere between these two is a sweet spot, where both your CPU and GPU are being maxed out. It's at this theoretical point that you'll still be getting the maximum frame rate possible, but it'll still look much nicer than playing down here. In this computer, the sweet spot is at 1080p. There's literally no point in gaming at anything lower than that, because it won't improve your performance. Of course, you might still argue that you'd still rather play at 720p, just in case. Sure, okay, but I'm the opposite, and I urge you to consider this as well. Ask yourself, which frame rate are you happy with? 60? 144? 300? Because unless you need 500, which let's face it, you probably don't, then with this computer you could comfortably go beyond the sweet spot until you drop down to the lowest frame rate that you're happy with. Now some of you will scoff at this. If you're on a super slow potato PC, then you don't have this luxury. You might not be happy with any of the frame rates that you get, at any resolution. And if you want to reach your desired frame rate, you may have no other choice but to upgrade your PC. I am saying this to acknowledge that you exist, but that this video's topic isn't aimed at you. This is instead aimed at people with powerful graphics cards who may be gaming down here when they really don't need to be. I'll also point out that upgrading your CPU counterintuitively means that you benefit more from playing at a low resolution, which is great if you really need 700 FPS instead of 500. But again, for the rest of us, at some point, surely we've got to start benefiting from a higher resolution than from more frame rates. So what does this mean for you? I'd recommend that you find a demanding spot on a demanding map and that you test it out at different resolutions using your computer. You might be pleasantly surprised to discover that you can game at acceptable frame rates at a massive resolution like 1080p, or maybe even higher still, entering the world of downsampling, where you force a resolution that's higher than your monitor has the pixels to fully display. To enable these magical higher resolutions, Nvidia owners will want to enable DSR in their control panel, and AMD owners are looking for something called VSR, which is the same but for AMD. As an example of the sort of testing you could start out with, I used this spot on Ancient, experimenting with all sorts of different resolutions and levels of anti-aliasing, and these were the frame rates I got. And what a show-off I am. Anything in green is so similar to what I get at 720p that it's virtually the same. You can see that 1440p with MSAA runs at 93% the speed that 720p does, which, in my opinion, and in most other gamers, that makes it worth using 1440p instead. Look at that. Had I not done this testing, I might have thought this level of graphical fidelity would have come with a greater performance impact than it really does. The values in yellow do run a bit slower than 720p, but still very well, and the red ones perform at below 75% the maximum speed my PC could output. You can see that running CSGO at 4K with 8x MSAA and FXAA runs at only 54% of my PC's maximum speed. Oh no, that means I'm only getting 226 frames a second, which is still perfectly fine for me. How about that? So yeah, higher resolutions and settings look nicer. If only there was a way of getting the benefits with fewer of the downsides. And that's what DLDSR attempts to do. It will only be available to you in Nvidia's control panel, and only if you have an RTX card. It currently supports just a few resolutions, but if you enable it, then it swaps out the traditional DSR version of downscaling for a new, experimental one that Nvidia claims uses deep learning to improve the image quality. So just to establish what DLDSR is, it's still downscaling, it is still running at a higher resolution than your screen is, so it will still run slower than native resolution will. But Nvidia claims it makes this process more efficient. They state that DLDSR makes 2.25 times the resolution of native look as good as 4 times does. That's almost double the number of pixels for free. Based on this claim, I calculated all of these figures for those of you who are interested. But the short and simple of it is, if your monitor is this, then DLDSR will run as slowly as this resolution does, but should look as good as this resolution would. In other words, you get extra visual quality for the cost of a lower one. How? Is it magic? I can confirm that it isn't magic. I can also confirm that it runs only 1 to 2% slower than the resolution that it's based upon. And it does look nicer than that resolution, but it's harder to explain exactly what's going on here. But first, some comparisons between it and the traditional DSR downscaling. First, when they're both set to 0% smoothness. This is going to be the sharpest option and probably how competitive players will want to use this setting. What you're seeing here is the more traditional older method of downscaling called DSR, and what strikes me about it is how uneven the result looks. In some bits of the image it's well anti-aliased, but other parts of the screen are left untouched. I assume this is down to how it's trying to crush 1 and a bit pixels into each and every one. The maths involved is messy, and so is the result. But whatever DLDSR, the new method, is doing, it's doing more consistently. It's giving the entire image the same high standard of anti-aliasing, while still somehow managing to retain the sharpness of the textures. I'd say it's too sharp. The walls look like crumpled paper, and it looks like there's noise in the sky and tree leaves. Yet I wouldn't be surprised if pros opted to play the game like this for the crazy levels of sharpness it provides. 33% smoothness in the control panel is the default amount that Nvidia recommends, and DSR, being the normal kind of downscaling, looks okay like this, but it still fails to anti-alias a number of the edges. But the benefit is that it's still sharper than you might expect from an image that's been downscaled. Switching over to DLDSR, and this is the sweet spot for me. It's still very sharp, but not ridiculously so anymore, and the anti-aliasing is sublime, especially given that none is active in CSGO. That's right, these images are being managed with zero anti-aliasing in-game. And last, here's 100% smoothness, which makes DSR look like a bad Nintendo 64 game. That's at least 2 rows of anti-aliasing on the roof here. How about that? It's made 1440p look like 144p, but the 100% smoothness setting makes DLDSR look about normal. The textures don't look sharp anymore, nor do they look overly soft. But let's face it, you'll still want to play with more sharpness than this, won't you? So we've established that 33% is the sweet spot. So I'll show a few comparisons at this setting as I talk about it more. In short, first impressions of DLDSR are very positive indeed. It somehow manages to be sharper and better anti-aliased than the traditional DSR option for downscaling is. So I think it's fair to say that most people will look at these images and will say that DLDSR is undisputedly better. And this is just the 1.78x mode. It's got a higher quality 2.25x1 as well, but I don't need to test that for this video. The strengths of the technology are already evident in this mode, and if you somehow want smoother edges still, and have some performance left over, then just add some MSAA to CSGO to really iron out the trickiest edges. Going up to 2.25x is good for adding more stability to the really fine details of the image, but it of course comes with more of a performance impact. But to summarise, DLDSR does away with pixelation of any sort. It's movie levels of smoothing. I'd even say it looks a bit too smooth in parts. Sometimes you don't want it to be smooth. Sometimes an image should have some mess and noise to it, which DLDSR completely eradicates and swaps out for a perfect, almost painted look instead. Dare I say it even inherits some of the looks from DLSS 1. Ultimately, it's down to personal preference whether you think DLDSR is an improvement or not. But one thing I can do is to compare it with how the image should look. I'll start by confirming that DLDSR is literally based on the same resolution as it claims to be rendering at. I know this sounds obvious, but right now there are people out there who believe that this technology is magic, but it isn't. It does start off with the same pixels as a normal image of that resolution would. How do I know that? Well, it's obvious. You can tell that by the way it is and how these bits here are in the same bits as the same but slightly blurrier bits in this image here. Trust me on this. So it starts with the same image and then applies DLDSR magic to it. But how do we establish whether this magic also adds tangible detail to the image? To aid me in this, meet Nice Tree 1. When you look at this tree, what do you see? Yes, you see leaves, but between them you see gaps. Gaps and leaves, leaves and gaps. Now, let's move the camera away from it. Pay attention to what happens to the gaps between the leaves. At a lower resolution, it loses these gaps, making the tree appear more opaque and thus bigger and scarier looking than it should be. But a higher resolution image retains the gaps better and is therefore more faithful to how it should look. Clearly, this tree is supposed to look see-through, so if DLDSR does indeed add detail to the image, you'd expect it to make the tree look more see-through. So if we move from this 8K image, which shows a lot of holes in the tree, down to the resolution that DLDSR is based upon, but with DLDSR disabled, then it looks like this, and with far fewer transparent looking bits. Now, as I enable DLDSR, I'm hoping that more transparent bits will appear, if it actually adds detail to the image. Oh dear, that's not good. DLDSR doesn't manage to make the bush more see-through. In fact, it appears to be doing the opposite, making the bush even less transparent than it should be for the resolution it's based upon. You know what else does this? FXAA. Oh no! Now of course DLDSR looks nicer than FXAA does, but it works in the same sort of way. It doesn't add detail, it merely gets the image and applies a filter to it. Admittedly, DLDSR's filters seem more intelligent than simply to blob the whole image up. But at the end of the day, I'm seeing nothing more than pretty post-process effects going on here. So what is DLDSR's secret to its success? For a start, running the game above the resolution your monitor displays must help it a lot. But I also think it's how it retains as much detail as it does as it shrinks down to your monitor's display for you to see. I've acknowledged that it doesn't add more detail to the image than the resolution it's using would suggest. Nvidia's claim that it's the equivalent of a higher one must be down to how smooth the edges are, or the sharpness of its textures, which I suspect was achieved just by applying the upscaling algorithm they created, but for downscaling instead. But I could be wrong. I must move on. So while DLDSR produces a lovely smooth image, even without anti-aliasing, if you want the most accurate image quality, then you're still better off brute forcing the downscaling with high resolutions and anti-aliasing levels instead. The higher you go, the closer to perfection the image will become. So to those of you looking to up your image quality, then turning on anti-aliasing is a great place to start, and it shouldn't impact your frame rate as significantly as increasing your resolution will. However, decent modern computers should have no problem running the game at 1080p, and once you've already done that and have added 2 or 4 times anti-aliasing, the game will already look great. And many of you will stop there, but just know the visuals will continue to improve as you push up beyond that. And when it comes to the wonderful world of downscaling, if you're on a 1080p screen, then 1440p with 2 times MSAA is a good place to start. And then you should scale upwards or downwards from there, depending on the frame rates you're getting. And yes, DLDSR is an option at that point if you like the image it produces. But the highest feasible setting you could aim for, if wanting to take super pretty screenshots or if you're filming a frag movie, will be 4K with 8 times MSAA. That remains the holy grail if you want CSGO to look absolutely as close to perfection as it possibly can right now. It looks like the shift has begun. Rodder, an official, posted on Reddit a few months ago, remarking that a number of pros had already started using anti-aliasing. Maybe the scene has started to appreciate better image quality and the potential of modern graphics cards. And about time, I say. And the next step beyond this is downscaling. It's a taste of the future. It will make CSGO look better than it should do on your screen right now, and will make it look more like it will do once we finally jump to higher resolution monitors, maybe 5 or 10 years down the line. And if your graphics card can already handle it at a frame rate you're happy with, why not start playing that way a little early?